First thing I want to ask you, man, is what did you think of the swing off? It caught me by surprise. I wasn't ready for it, but I sat down and I watched it, and I loved every minute of it.
Oh, 100%. And, hey, don't feel bad. I think a lot of people were caught off guard by it, and that was part of what made it fun. This was a rule that's actually been in effect for the last few years, but this is, of course, the first time we've actually seen it come into play. But, yeah, getting to be in the ballpark for that was really special. I think when people started to understand what was about to happen, you could tell a lot of the people even in the crowd, and as we learned after, a lot of even the players didn't even really know that this is what it was going to end up being. But it was such a cool moment. It was so pure. It was just such a kind of spontaneous isn't totally the right word because we knew it was planned beforehand, but it just felt so genuine. And obviously the way the actual swing off unfolded with Schwarber, with Aranda, with the near miss in his final round was really, really cool.
Jordan, this is not Stacy. This is Curtis talking to you.
You don't sound like Stacy. Yeah, okay.
No, not at all. But I want to know from you, where does this All-Star break rank in terms of the best that you can remember or have been to? Because, I mean, it's rare you get the classic Derby All-Star game combo.
Oh, that's exactly right. And this is exactly what my pal Jake Mintz and I were talking about on the drive home last night. So this is the 9th All-Star game that we've covered. So it's just not exactly a super expansive history of All-Star games, but we have been to the last 9, and this is absolutely up there. I mean, I think the Derby is normally our favorite event and something that sustains, the longest. But the fact that we then get to add in this swing off, and honestly, an All-Star game that even before then was pretty entertaining. I would say there was more stuff that happened in this Derby in that game than even normally. So we said it was pretty comfortably up there in the top 2 or 3. Our first one was San Diego. That had a memorable Derby with Stanton. We were there for the Bryce Harper home run Derby. Of course, Julio's had some unbelievable Derby moments that certainly stand out. But the whole totality of the week, I do think this was really strong.
What did you think of the catchers and the pitchers being mic'd up? I thought Skubal and Cal were pretty vanilla, bland. But then I think Kershaw gets there, and obviously he's a bit more comfortable in that situation. 11-time All-Star, been in the game for so long. And he showed a bit more of the personality. I think it's cool to kind of get an insight to who these guys are when they're on the mound.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. So obviously, being in the ballpark, I'm not necessarily seeing that live, but I'm seeing the clips on social media. And this is another thing that, generally, I think the All-Star game, especially compared to the Derby, is a much better television product. Whereas the Derby, being there in person, I think really makes a big difference. But I think the mic'd up moments, this is when you should be doing it. I am not a particularly huge fan of miking guys up during the regular season. It's not even that it's I'm trying to take it too seriously. It's just I don't enjoy watching it. I just get stressed out that guys are going to mess up in games that matter, and that. I don't like that, and it feels like the way that the guys respond kind of shows that. But in this case, this is exactly when you should kind of give them an opportunity. And for Kershaw, of all people, to be that open and to be that funny in those moments, I think was really, really cool.
Jordan, bringing it back to the Mariners here, prior to the All-Star break, they had their best series of the season, immediately following maybe their worst series of the season. So what do you make of this team right now at the break, coming off of that really crucial sweep of the Tigers?
Yeah, so it's pretty amazing timing because I got to Atlanta on Thursday night, and I watched the disaster that unfolded after the Brian Wu no-hit bid. And since we get to the All-Star game that early, we get there Thursday because we do a futures game and drafts and all this stuff. I watched no baseball on the weekend, that final weekend leading in. And so as I was just checking in throughout, I was like, man, they're dominating the Tigers in Detroit. What is going on? Julio's going off and all these great things. So I'm still kind of trying to wrap my mind around what exactly happened over those 3 games, but it certainly puts them in a good spot. There's no better feeling than going into the break on a high like that. But can they continue to show that? Can the offense, again, we're seeing this, the offense being way more potent on the road than at home, coming back home now, getting to face Houston. So we'll see how that offense picks it up. But I think getting Raley back, getting Julio heating up, and I think you're starting to see really the full power of this lineup.
Speaking of Houston, obviously you just mentioned, right, you open up a series in the second half of the season against them. What do we need to see? Because every series is an evaluation on what they should do at the trade deadline. What can we gain out of this series against Houston?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think Houston remains in a very, very strange spot. Obviously, they still have this pretty good cushion atop the division, but there's still some pretty serious questions, and it's amazing for as impressive as they've been and for how much they've won consistently. They did not exactly finish on a good note going into the second half. Getting swept by Cleveland, who's going off a 10-game losing streak. They have some questions, and some that we still are not really sure when are going to be answered. Guys like Jordan Alvarez, when are we going to see him again, if at all? So Houston is a team I'm very quietly interested in terms of the deadline, because while they still do not have a very strong farm system, we know that they are willing to be aggressive. And so if they view this team as a team that can win the American League still, and I have to imagine they still do, I am very curious to see how they get creative in order to address some of the more obvious needs on their roster.
Jordan, you've been around a lot of baseball guys over the last 4 or 5 days there in Atlanta. Were there any names talked about that you were maybe surprised to hear in trade conversation, or is it just kind of what we've all been hearing from all the MLB insiders over the last month or so, just the regular names?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think obviously right. Once you get past All-Star, you really put into deadline mode. And I'll be honest, I wasn't having too many deadline specific, trying to nail down some intel there. But I think it's kind of the teams that you're expecting. Now, how big are we talking about? Honestly, I think some of the more interesting ones is just like the Braves, right? I mean, obviously, we're being in Atlanta, thinking about who they could potentially move if they're going to continue to be, below the Marlins in the standings. Now, they don't have as many super obvious trade candidates, and I'm not going to waste my time talking about trading Acuna, but a guy like Sean Murphy is super, super interesting to me as far as a trade candidate. Now, he also got an extension, but that's a guy that they have, Drake Baldwin, who is just already one of the more underrated players in the league. I know he's a rookie, but what he's been able to do as a rookie catcher, if they believe he could be the catcher of the future, and someone like the Padres come calling and want to give them the haul for Sean Murphy, catcher trades are pretty rare in the middle of the season. It's a tough thing to do when you have to get a guy on the same page as his pitching staff in the middle of the year. But that's the name I'm watching. Guys like Ozuna and Iglesias, maybe they get moved, but I don't think those are necessarily going to be for, massive prospect calls the way that a guy like Sean Murphy would.
I can almost guarantee you spoke about this on your podcast. What did you make of the Mariners draft, and anyone else have a draft that's worth mentioning?
Yeah, no, draft was really fun. I think that, as simple as it is, because we've been building up to this number 3 pick for a while now, you maybe lose sight of just how remarkable it is that this team that won 85 games last year ends up with the number 1 player on their board. Like, that is a wild sequence of events for them to get Kate Anderson at 3. Of course, it relied heavily on the teams ahead of them to kind of swerve away from consensus, which I totally support the Nationals' decision to do that, because Eli Willis was the number 1 player on my board. But the Angels' decision to go with Bremner, and then for the Mariners to get Kate Anderson, have some other interesting picks beyond that. And I think the fun thing around the Mariners drafts now is because they've done it so well recently, they take a guy like Nick Becker, who's a high school shortstop from New Jersey, was not necessarily one of my favorite players in the prep class, but who am I to say? They've been nailing pick after pick after pick of these guys that I'm just inclined to believe that he's going to become a top 100 prospect in a year. So that's kind of what they've earned. The scouting department, this player development group has really earned, and I think that that's clearly one of the biggest strengths of the organization.
One of the talking points that stemmed from the draft from the Mariners' standpoint is, does their compensatory round pick, Luke Stevenson, maybe make Harry Ford even more available because he's a catcher, Ford's a catcher? Do you think that will have any impact on the Mariners making Ford available?
I would say no, because I think Harry Ford was already extremely available. And I will say it was pretty amazing that they took, look, you don't draft for need in baseball. That said, the Mariners of all teams taking, I think, 3 catchers. I know they also got Grant Jay. I think there was one other one. But Luke Stevenson, that is one. I really like Luke Stevenson. I would never have expected Seattle to spend that pick on him, but clearly they believe he was, the best player on their board. And I think that I don't think it impacts. I guess, sure, because, it's a college catcher who in theory could, get in the upper minors quicker. I don't know. In some other ways you have to consider that you can never have too much catching. But I also think that the Ford situation was already pretty clear, which is that he is absolutely a top trade candidate, for better or for worse. I totally understand the people that are going to be hurt if and when they trade him, but his biggest trade value is as a catcher in the major leagues, and that is not going to happen on a regular level. with Cal Raleigh, who I don't know if you guys saw. He won the home run derby. Did you guys see that? I think that I don't think it really changes that much. I mean, I definitely was intrigued by that pick. I don't think it changes the Port situation that much.
Hey, how should Mariners fans approach the rest of the season mentally? I mean, you have a team that fooled you, right? You get swept by the Yankees, you're down. You sweep the Tigers, you're up. You got the Astros coming up. Stacy pointed out the other day they probably have like the 23rd or 24th easiest schedule coming up in the second half. What should be the mental approach watching this team for the rest of the year?
They've shown enough that they do deserve to be taken seriously as one of the likelier teams to end up in one of those 3 wildcard spots, and maybe chase down Houston if Houston starts to have some more issues. But I think that they have to act that way at the deadline. I think that they will act that way at the deadline. I think that the best version of this team is still one of the 5 or 6 best teams in the American League. And while they are flawed, like a lot of these other AL teams in the middle, I think that their ceiling and honestly their floor, I do believe is higher than that middle group of Texas, of Minnesota, of Cleveland, of Kansas City, of the Angels. I think they're above that. Now, I think what becomes more interesting is teams like Boston, right, for how they finished on a 10-game winning streak going into the break. How do you stack up with them? How do you stack up with Tampa Bay? That's what's going to be Toronto, New York. Like, how they compare to those East teams is, I think, going to be really define where they kind of end up and what they're capable of. Obviously, what they showed against the Yankees was not especially encouraging, but I think that was not a small performance what they did against Detroit. So I think they're in it. I think that I think they're going to make it in some form. Do I think they're going to chase down Houston? I don't think so. But I do think that this is a year that, with a weaker American League, I think they're going to find their way into the postseason.
Jordan, what have you made of the heater that Randy Arozarena has been on? 9 home runs in his last 13 games, has been a huge force in this lineup. Is that somebody you think can continue to carry that into the season's second half?
Randy is not getting nearly enough love. Randy Arozarena is a freaking star. Not only does he have like that star power just from an aesthetic perspective, and just he's been so productive. And like this is going about as well as you could possibly hope. I mean, you're getting one of the best versions that we've seen from him. I mean, we're never going to see what he did in October of 2020 ever again, but this is what you hope for. This is why you trade for a guy last year that had multiple years of team control, that he could be this productive. I don't think Randy's getting nearly enough praise for what he's been in this lineup. And as you point out, especially recently, it's a huge difference. We talk about, this lineup's this is the same thing every year. It's like, no, Randy has not been around. Like, this is a new character that needs to be, I think, appreciated. And if he can keep it going, I think it's a big part of why I think that they have a real chance of making the postseason.
All right, before we get you out of here, Jordan, what you got coming up? Where can the people hear you?
Yeah, so just check out Baseball Barbacast. We recorded late last night after the swing off, where you can hear plenty more about Cal Raleigh, who, again, I don't know if you guys noticed, but did win the home run derby. It was really cool. And Jake, my colleague Jake, wrote a fantastic story, talked to the Raleigh family on the field after the game. I encourage everyone to go check that out, Yahoo Sports. But yeah, second half couldn't go in. We'll have a pod coming out on Friday again, so you can read everything at Yahoo and subscribe to Baseball Barbacast.
All right, it's Yahoo Sports Jordan Shusterman. Jordan, we appreciate you. Talk to you next week.
Thanks, Jordan.
Yep. Sounds good, guys. See ya.